Today I'm going to tell you about my very favorite Nintendo fan podcast. I'm talking, of course, about Nintendo Voice Chat, a podcast by IGN, and it comes out weekly every single Friday, and it's all about Nintendo. And honestly, this podcast is a huge part of my Nintendo fandom. It's a great source of news. It's some of the best Nintendo discussion that you can find around. Many of you are probably already listeners. I'm just going to talk about my favorite parts of the show, and for those of you who have never tried subscribing to IGN's Nintendo podcast, this is a great chance to hear about it for the first time, so I hope you'll give it a listen. I look forward to Fridays because of Nintendo Voice Chat, and they publish pretty consistently. I mean, there's a few times when, the host is in Japan, playing Nintendo, or a holiday gets in the way or something like that. But on the whole, they are a really consistent and just generally professional podcast. This show, it uses great audio equipment, high quality microphones. It's owned by a huge company, so they really have good production. You can listen to it on audio. You can subscribe to it on iTunes. You can also go on YouTube and watch the video version, which sometimes has some cool extras. And what you have to love about Nintendo Voice Chat is the host. The hosts are great. Jose Otero is the main Nintendo person at IGN, and he's responsible for Nintendo content, and he does a great job leading the show. Also, it's great to hear Schneider, who's one of the co-founders of IGN, and he actually comes on the podcast. And he doesn't make appearances on all of the podcasts, like the ones for, Xbox and PlayStation, but he takes the time each week to go on Nintendo Voice Chat. So I think that's awesome. He carves out time in his busy schedule for that, and he really brings a lot to the show because he's an industry veteran, and he has such good insights onto what Nintendo is doing, what their announcements actually mean for the future of the company and stuff. Just, he makes you really think as a Nintendo fan, so it's great. There's also Brian Altano. He's the last regular on the show, and he's great. He's got this big personality. He's Italian. He's loud. He's hilarious. He's a comedian, basically. He's also just the stereotypical Nintendo fan that, buys the digital games over and over again and has to collect every amiibo, and he gets bitten by all the fandom bugs, and it's just hilarious. He really relates to the common Nintendo fan, brings everything back to our level, and always brings the listeners into the conversation and represents our opinions. So it's awesome. I want to talk a little bit more about Jose as a host. He's not your usual podcast host. He has next to no tolerance for rabbit trails. He has a written down list of topics that he brings with him each podcast, and he just keeps the show on the rails. So the hosts don't go off, talking about their weekends, talking about their pets, which is what I would be talking about right now because my wife and I just got a new cat. You may have met her on our live stream. And there's an example of a rabbit trail, and Jose would just cut it off, go back to the topic. He usually finds a good way to transition back into the show. And, some listeners might know that as a Craig way, and that's if you've been listening to Nintendo Voice Chat for a long time, since before Jose was hosting, before he even worked at IGN. I've listened to the show for a long time, since Matt Casamassina and Bozon were the hosts. And after that, it went to Craig Harris, and Samuel Claiborne was on the show a lot more. And then Rich George, who now works for Nintendo, he hosted the podcast for a while. And I've listened through all of these hosts, and I've just loved it since Jose got brought on board at IGN. And he does a great job. He makes sure you get a solid hour of just pure Nintendo conversation. One thing that really stands out about this podcast and just sets it apart from all the other Nintendo podcasts and all the other Nintendo fan sites is that these guys really set the tone for the conversation. They bring originality to the discussion around Nintendo's announcements and game releases. And if you listen for it, if you watch for it, you can see the rest of the industry kind of reacting to what they said. For example, when Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was first shown at E3, I was really excited to get to the Nintendo Voice Chat podcast about this topic, and they came together and they talked about a concern that the world looked too empty. And that wasn't really a concern that had occurred to anyone else before. But as soon as they discussed it, then, it's kind of like the Nintendo websites are a bunch of parrots, and they kind of repeat that concern. And that's just one example. It happens all the time. They really take the time, they think through their opinions, they bring new discussion to the table, and a lot of times that has ripple effects throughout the rest of the industry. So just watch for it, listen to the podcast first, and then see kind of how the internet picks up on how Nintendo Voice Chat feels about it, and Nintendo fans just kind of run with it. So they're like, I like to think of them as the trendsetters in the Nintendo fan world. There's also a segment on Nintendo Voice Chat called the Question Block, where listeners can send in their questions, and Jose, being the super time-focused podcast host, he has a timer that the host can't go over. It's like 4 minutes to answer each question. That sounds like a lot of time, but really with the depth that they get into in the discussions, 4 minutes goes pretty quick. And what's nice is they answer quite a few questions each time they do this segment. So it's great. So that's pretty much all I had to say about it. I just get super excited each time I see a new episode downloading to my podcast app. Nintendo Voice Chat is one of the highlights of my week, one of the highlights of me being a Nintendo fan. It's awesome. It's like having the most dedicated Nintendo fans as friends that you can sit down and talk to. You meet with them once a week, and you get to talk for an hour and just have the best Nintendo discussion each and every time. So when I hear their voices, it's like I'm hearing friends because I've known them for so long, and we have so much in common. So it's great. I really can't recommend it enough. Just give the latest episode a try, and let me know what you think in the comments if you've tried it out or if you've been a listener for a long time. So thanks for watching this crew cut. I'll be back with Simeon real soon. Stay tuned for that, and thank you for being a part of the crew. If you wouldn't mind, please drop a like, a thumbs up on this video. It helps us out a ton. It helps other Nintendo fans find good quality content that Two Button Crew is bringing to YouTube every single weekday. You guys have a great day. We'll see you next time.